6:02, I will call the meeting to order. Our first item is the minutes. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sarah, can you read our mission statement?
The mission of the Marshall Public School District is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Jeff and seconded by Sarah Runcie to approve the agenda. Any additions or corrections? If not, I'll call for the vote. Excuse me. The agenda is approved. Next item is our Tiger Spotlight.
All right, I'm going to invite Dylan and Mr. Peterson up to the front for a minute. This weekend, Dylan got to participate in the Macy's Day Parade, and he came back to be here for this evening to share a little bit with you guys about it. So we'll let Dylan talk a little bit, but maybe Dr. Peterson, if you want to talk a little bit first about how he got in there, or maybe what that is a little bit, then we'll let Dylan talk a bit too.
So last year, if you remember, I was here with Jacob Zimmer, who also marched, and Jacob discovered, we discovered there's some openings in the band. I let Jacob know about that, and then we worked together and got that going. So this last spring, Dylan said, I'm really interested in that. I think I'd really like to try that. I said, great, sounds good. And the next thing I knew, he's like, I made it. And he didn't ask me to work with him. He just took it upon himself. He just applied himself, auditioned himself, recorded himself. There's all these videos you have to send in and stuff. And so I really honestly didn't have a lot to do with it other than just say, excellent, I think that'd be a good thing to do. What I do want to highlight for Dylan is that Jacob, we're super proud of Jacob, but he got in when there was still openings available. Dylan auditioned right off the bat. So he was in competition with everybody right from the get-go and still made it. So I think that's a real testament to his talent and his perseverance and his just his dedication to practicing and preparing himself really well for that. So anyways, congratulations to you. I should shake your hand. So yeah, I'll let him talk about his experiences. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade experience started mainly on Saturday, where I first showed up there, got fitted. It was just a really quick evening, and finally got to bed. Met some really fun people, but Sunday is when the first practice was, and obviously the nerves were all there. I mean, it's the first 2-hour practice, and it's something short, but I mean, being around people that are equally as passionate about something that you really love is just something, you don't find in many places. So it was a great first day, and then, the next day, an 8-hour practice where definitely worked my tail off, but, finally being able to get everything together, because that's the day where we finally put everything together with the marching and the playing. Just a really fun time that day. Monday, that was Monday. Tuesday was a 4-hour practice where it also, just overall with all the practices went by really fast. And I think it's that was mainly because of how much fun I was having throughout the entire experience. I mean, just 4 hours went by as fast as, like a 30-minute class. But that day we also found out that we were going to be part of the opening ceremony for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which was obviously something really cool to find out, meaning, got more TV time and just a little bit more practice. So then the next day was Wednesday, where we were doing another 3-hour practice where my dad and my mom and my sister were able to show up and see us practice and see it a little bit. It was just really awesome because I hadn't seen my family in a little bit. So, being able to have them watch the final product the day before was just something I really thought was cool. But then, we had another 3-hour practicing the beginning opening ceremony. And, just like that, 4 days of practice just went by, resulting in Thursday, which, waking up at 1 a.m, feeling like tired, but also so excited. Being out of the hotel at 2, practicing at 3 a.m, then finally being outside and raining, something that usually doesn't happen for that since the band has started, but there was a lot of it. But I just thought it was like, honestly, it was just like a great experience being able to walk, 2.5 mile route, being able to play music that I've been working so hard on for the past couple, like half a year, basically. Just something that I really enjoyed. But I'd like to thank the directors, Rick Good and Ron Williams, from that helped start the parade and everything. I'd like to thank my dad, who actually helped record the videos that I submitted. Oh, yeah, I play alto saxophone.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Have been since 5th grade, and, really grateful for the opportunity that I was put in. But I'd mainly like to thank Mr. Peterson for, I would not be able to even have the opportunity without him, or, since joining marching band freshman year, all my skills are attributed to him. So I really like to thank him for all the skills and things that he's done for me in the entire marching band program.
I want to know what's more grueling, the week of band camp or this week of getting ready for the parade?
Ooh, that is a difficult one, because band camp is longer, technically. Oh, but yeah, it is a lot warmer. So I think honestly the Macy's one is just a little bit more difficult, because it's like constantly doing like back and forth, while we are doing that for band camp. It's also a lot more relaxed, and obviously I know everyone that's there, and so I think it was a little bit more difficult for the Macy's.
How big a band was this?
It's about 200 to 250 people. It's a lot of people, and just like the noise as well. It's just crazy to hear in person. So yeah.
There's over 800 people that auditioned.
Wow.
Wow.
Great.
Well, congratulations, Dylan. We're proud of you.
Thank you.
Proud of you. Oh, don't run off.
We have a certificate here for you too, Dylan.
I got a certificate for you. Congratulations. Did you want to take a picture?
Yes, please. Can I take a picture of you in front of the?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Am I up next?
Yeah, public forum venue.
Thank you for representing us at that, Dylan. Congratulations.
It's gonna be really bored.
Our next item is our public forum. Does anybody from the public want to approach the board? Seeing none. Next item is our presentation, our annual truth in taxation. Welcome,
Thank you.
Sarah Kay.
All right, so, good evening. My name is Sarah Kirshner, for those of you that may not know me or are watching online potentially. And I serve as the Director of Finance for Marshall Public Schools, and tonight I'll be presenting information on our annual Truth in Taxation public hearing. So, you may ask why we are required to have this hearing.
Why are we required to have this hearing, Sarah?
Get turned off.
Like it turned off. On the side, there's a, does it say on or off? By that.
It says on. Battery is low. It's blinking.
What kind of battery
I'll
do you
just
need?
cue you. How about that?
That's supposed to help break the nerves.
Replace the batteries when we're done.
Yeah.
All right, so as I mentioned, there are a couple different requirements that are required for this public hearing. And according to state law, which actually dates back to 1989, We are required to walk through a few examples of property tax statements and how property taxes work, which can be quite complex, and how those property taxes then relate to our school levy. We'll also review this year's school budget, and you'll hear me refer to it as the fiscal year '25 budget. And we'll talk about that along with the various funding streams that make up the budget. Feel free to stop me anytime for questions, and we will leave time at the end for public comment. Just looking pretty sparse. All right, so there are a number of different factors that play into how property taxes are determined. The county assessors stay busy with determining the market value for each parcel of property that are in their jurisdiction. And you may have had them knocking on your door occasionally, asking to come in, evaluate your property to determine that market value. The legislature for Minnesota also sets formulas for the tax capacity, which basically determines how this tax burden is going to be split between the different types of property in your jurisdiction. So that can be residential properties, commercial, agriculture. Seasonal recreation is going to be, your cabin that you have out at a lake or in the woods. And then your county auditor is who calculates that tax capacity for each parcel and the tax capacity then for the school district based on these different formulas. You should recall that the school board did vote to certify the maximum levy authority back in September, and these limits are also set by the legislature. And this is what the vast majority of districts do, unless they choose to under levy, and that's typically for a specific program that they're not planning to or choose to implement. And also at this time, schools then are submitting a lot of data to the state through the levy certification system. And this can include, our projected enrollments, various programs that we are participating in, our long-term facility maintenance data, and any current leases or bonds that we currently have balances on. And the state is then factoring all those things in to determine our district's maximum tax capacity. All right, next up here on the presentation, you can see the various types of property classifications that are out there, from farms to residential homesteads to commercial industrial businesses, and what has been determined to be what they'll be taxed on based on their market value. So, for example, residential homesteads will be taxed at 1.14% on the market value of that property. And then below, it breaks down the share of their tax liability. So you can see there's a pretty significant difference between what residential homesteads are paying based on their market value, and then comparing it to their share of the net taxes that they're paying for their jurisdiction. And typically that's because there are a lot more residential homes in a jurisdiction than there are going to be commercial properties or potentially agricultural properties in your jurisdiction. All right, next we'll look at a couple of different areas of tax credits that taxpayers are potentially able to get. The Ag to School tax credit was put into place for ag property owners back in 2017. And it also includes timber owners, which we don't see a lot of in this area. And basically, the credit has increased annually from 2017, which is when it started, but has now leveled off since 2023 at the 70%. So our ag landowners are receiving a 70% tax credit on the market value of their land, which can be significant, especially in our area. Next up, the Minnesota State Legislature in 2023 passed laws that affect property taxes for taxes now payable in 2025. And these provide a benefit to homeowners by increasing the homestead exclusion for valuations between houses at $76,000 up to $517,000 with a maximum exclusion amount of $38,000. This does reduce the property's taxable value by that credit amount that is given. Another significant portion of this change legislatively is that they did increase the first tier of the ag homestead land. You can see there, which the net tax capacity is at 0.50% from 2.5 million up to 3.5 million. So if a landowner has, say, $4.5 million, that difference is $10,000 based on that 0.5%. So they're receiving a significant tax credit when they're up in that range. All right, so next we're going to just take a look at a couple examples of property tax statements. These should look pretty familiar to those of you that are from Lyon County. This is an example of a property tax statement that the first thing you really want to look at is what your taxable market value is and compare it to the prior year to see if that has gone up, down, or unchanged. So I thought this was a unique example where the market value hasn't changed, but you can see down in the property taxes being assessed that those do change from year to year, even if your property market value doesn't change, because there are so many factors that go into the various taxes and the types of taxes they are, and a lot of that is determined by the state. So in this example, you can see down in line 9 for the school district, there are voter-approved levies, and from 2023 to 2024, that dollar amount actually went down. And what you can primarily attribute that to is we haven't taken on any additional levies in our school district. We're just continuing to pay that down. And then other local levies for the school district, the majority of that is accounted for by our LTFM funding that we receive from the state. That's typically going to fluctuate primarily based on the different types of projects that we're looking at doing in the school district. We have that plan approved every year by both the school board and MDE. And again, that can change just based on the different projects that we're looking at doing.
Sarah, can you just spell out LTFM? For
Oh,
everybody?
long-term facility maintenance. Sorry. So yep, it's any maintenance projects on our facilities that fall into that specific category, and it is very specific on what you can spend that funding on. There's some pretty significant criteria for projects to qualify for it. All right, and the next tax statement we're going to look at is a farm with an acreage of 158 acres. So this is a pretty common thing we see in our area. And you can see the taxable market value from 2023 to 2024 went up pretty significantly. And that's just primarily based on the value of the land going from 1.4 million to 1.9 million. And this is a good example too, where I've highlighted or written out there in red where the Ag to School tax credit comes into play. So you can see the amounts that they're receiving as a tax credit for that land. And then again, you can see the school district section under number 9A, again, has gone down slightly. And our other local levies actually went up slightly for the ag land. And it all is dependent on those percentages that are set. So, as I said, there's a lot of factors that go into determining the school district's tax levy. I listed some of them here. They can be changes in home values. So we have seen home values typically increasing over the past several years. And there's also an equalization aid out there that the state sets. Some of those formulas have been stagnant for many, many years and aren't keeping up with what things are looking at like now. So we've seen a pretty significant shift between state aid and levy funding. So we're seeing that there's less state aid and we're having to depend more on property tax levies to cover the expenses that we're looking at. Obviously, some legislative changes, which I mentioned already. Obviously, the increase in or decrease in your school enrollments makes a significant difference because a lot of our funding is based on our student counts. And then if we have any voter-approved operating or capital levies out there. And there are a few things that school boards have the authority to make decisions on, including that long-term facility maintenance action that we do once a year as well. And they're constantly adjusting for our levies. All of these levies are set based on predictions for what's going to happen in the next year. So even at the end of each fiscal year, as final numbers come in, as audits are completed, they're making adjustments to our funding based on the true numbers at the end of each year. All right, and here I provided a graph showing what the major funding sources are for our general fund. We have several different fund balances, but our general fund is our largest source of funding. And you can see here that state sources, which does not include this levy funding that we're talking about, is our primary source of funding at 70%. And property taxes for the levy funding we're discussing is right at about 16 to 17% generally. And our federal sources of income at 9% primarily funds special education. And our other local sources at around 5% is going to be any grants or other funding streams that we're able to procure for different projects that we have.
And just to clarify, you were saying that the trend you would see is that the orange piece is getting bigger and the gray piece is not.
Yes. Property taxes making up more of that piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And another interesting graphic for you here that many of you have seen in the past if you've been sitting on the school board that we follow pretty closely is the trend of inflation and how our general education fund allowance is not keeping up with our inflation trend. So back in 2003, you could see that they were the same. So inflation was right at the same amount of our funding formula. Well, over the last 20 plus years now, those are moving farther and farther apart. And at this point in 2025 is the farthest apart that we've seen it. And it's the funding formula is trailing inflation by $1,364 per pupil. So if we would look at Marshall Public Schools and say we have approximately 2,400 students, that would result in an increase to our funding of just over $3.2 million. So that is a significant amount of money that we could do a lot with, but that formula for general education just has not changed to keep up with inflation. All right, next we are looking at the final levy calculation that the state has provided for Marshall Public Schools. And you can see it's divided into three different areas of funding. The first being our general fund, which again I said is our largest funding stream. And then community services also receives levy funding along with our general debt service. So overall, the funding is increasing by 1.11%, and in dollars, that equates to $87,199.83. And there's a graph there showing the distribution. And I would also like to point out that for community services, we do have an agreement with the City of Marshall, and they provide a great deal of our community education services, and we partner with them. And so we have an agreement that the portion of the community education funding in community services goes directly to the City of Marshall, which is right around about $100,000 of that total. We have a couple other programs that run out of the Community Services Fund, and one of them being Adult Basic Education that has its own funding streams, but just so you're aware, that's not included in the levy funding. The funding that the services we provide in the community services funding is going to be your early childhood education, ECFE, family education, early childhood family education, school readiness, and home visiting are the primary programs that we provide within the school district. And then lastly, our general debt services, that has gone down some, and that provides funding for any of our projects that we have, like bonds on. So if we're doing less projects or we don't have any major projects coming up, it's pretty common to see that that funding decreases because it's tied directly to those major projects. All right, and here we have our fiscal year 25 budget prepared. This budget gets approved in June of each year for the next fiscal year. And when preparing this document, we do base it on our audited financials. And I did make note here in the comments that this data is unaudited, as I don't have our final audit in my hands currently, but we should be receiving it shortly. So these numbers are coming directly from our auditors for fiscal year actual revenues and expenditures and fund balances, but just wanted to point that out. And another point of interest would be overall in the lower right-hand corner, you can see our total operating expenditures. We're at just over 44 million. And we had approximately 2,666 students. So for fiscal year 24, our prior year, our total cost then per student was at about 16,500 for the year. And then in our next slide, I'll go into a little more detail on the 2025 budget, which I have broke out the fund balances, which include, as you can see, a few additional funds that we have in our budget that don't necessarily have an impact by levy funding. So several of those in the far right-hand column have a 0% there because the levy doesn't contribute to those funds. You can see here, we have a budget in place for 2025 with a general fund negative balance of just over 1.1 million. And of that total, our levy contributes 12% to that. Food services, we have a slight imbalance there with a deficit of 52,000. Again, that isn't affected by the levy, and our food services are all contracted through TAHR. Our transportation fund is listed there. Community services, again, as I mentioned, we are at a deficit balance with the levy contributing 6% to that funding. And the majority of the funding is then through levy contributing 86% to debt service. So overall, for fiscal year 25, we are projecting a deficit of approximately 766,000. And then per the requirements of this public hearing, I am required to go through each of the major funds that the levy touches, which I've already kind of gone into detail on, but again, just some reasons for fund balances increasing or decreasing. With our general fund, again, we have increases to our long-term facilities maintenance, which can affect that fund balance, and the increase to our levy funding. Community services, again, we're seeing an increase to our various community education programming that we share with the City of Marshall, and again, listing the different programming that we do and receive levy funding for out of community services. And then our total general debt service decrease there. Again, we're paying down our debt and haven't taken on any additional debt. All right, and lastly, this is just the final breakdown of the acceptance process for approving our levy funding for fiscal year 25, payable in 25. I'm open to answering any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Next item is approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Sarah Runcie and a seconded by Sarah Brink to approve our consent agenda. I'll call for the vote. That is approved. Next item is board reports or updates. Anything from the board?
I will be finishing out my last year as a delegate to the Minnesota School Board Association for their delegate assembly, which is Saturday. That is where the Minnesota School Board Association finalizes their legislative priorities based upon votes from each member district.
Where do they have that at?
It is at the Doubletree in Bloomington.
Anything else?
Prior to this meeting, we had our facilities committee. We got together, kind of looked at projects completed this last year and then what will be in the forecast coming up. And then this next year, some good projects coming up. And that,
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else? Next item, a discussion item, first review of policy 610, 413-03, 413-04, and 413-06. Any comments on these?
Just share that as we went through procedures and policies around field trips and travel in general, we found a couple spots where we had a policy that was separate from procedure. We tried to merge those and just clarify some things. Sarah going through with some of this and making sure that process, procedure, and policy all aligned. So some clarification, no major changes in anything, but we had one indicated you needed a 30-day notice and another indicated you needed a 15-day notice, for example. So we aligned that and put it all in one spot. So a staff member that's looking to travel or do a field trip doesn't have to find it in two different places.
Very good. I'm going to review these again before we approve them, so. Next item, discussion on a summary of Superintendent Williams's 24-25 evaluation. Performance of review for Superintendent Jeremy Williams is now complete for the 24-25 school year. As part of the performance review process, an online evaluation was completed by the school board, district office staff, and school administration. The evaluation consisted of 5 sections with various rating areas in each section. A ranking scale of 1 to 4 was used, with 1 being performance is developing and 4 being performance is distinguished. So for Jeremy, under leadership, district culture, and communication, he had 3.29, policy, governance, and political influence and law, 3.13, strategic planning and organizational management, 3.2, school culture and learning, 3.15, management and resources, 3.11, for an overall performance of 3.18 on a scale of 4. The ratings in process indicate overall Superintendent Williams has met or exceeded expectations in each of the categories during the school year. The school board is pleased with his performance and the work he has done, focusing on student achievement. So thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah,
Appreciate all that you do. Any further discussion on that?
Can I ask, do we know how many, so it included evaluations from school board, district office staff, and school administration. How many responses? Do we know?
We do now.
We do. I don't have it
to
with
log
me.
in to
Sorry,
find out.
should have let you know before the meeting.
But I could-
Just curiosity.
Yeah.
Shoot that out to you.
Okay, and then it did say on here, it's the school board's cumulative ratings, but this is all of those
All of them.
reporters' cumulative ratings.
Correct.
Yeah,
Got
that's
it.
right.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
Just ours.
No, nothing urgent about that, just curiosity. Thank you.
Next item is an action item, approval of the C Street Southview Bike Trail easement. I'll need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sarah Runcie and seconded by Jeff to approve this. Any discussion?
This is an easement to allow the bike trail that's been planned. We've been talking about this for a few years now. We've talked about before at the board level. Facilities Committee reviewed it a bit earlier as well, but just we need the board approval then to move forward.
Very good. I will call for the vote. That is approved. Next board action is certification of the 24 payable 25 levy.
So moved.
Second.
Sarah Runcie, and a second by Anne Marie to approve the certification that was discussed earlier. Any further discussion?
I just reviewed it all, explained the details. So.
I will call for the vote. And that is approved. And the next item is adjournment. I will adjourn the meeting, so thanks, everyone.